Ryan Bennett, a project manager who had never lifted anything heavier than a Mont Blanc pen, laughed in my face on a massive wind farm site. He called me an overpaid lever puller and fired me to pad his quarterly bonus. He didn't realize I was the only operator in the tri-state area certified for the critical nacelle lift. 2 weeks later, his $300 million project was dead in the water. Before this story continues, tell me where you're watching from today and what's the temperature. I'm curious if it's as cold where you are as the look on Ryan's face when the silence finally hit the ridge. At 300 feet in the air, the wind doesn't just blow. It hunts. It searches for weakness in the steel, in the cable, and in the man sitting in the cab. I sat inside the command module of a Liebherr LR-13000, the most powerful crawler crane on the continent, watching the digital anemometer dance. The numbers flickered 18 miles per hour, 19. Then a sudden gust spiked it to 32. "All stop," I said into the radio. My voice was calm, the product of 30 years sitting in the seat of heavy machinery. "Wind shear is crossing the safety threshold. We are holding the load." Below me, the construction site of the Aurora Ridge Wind Farm looked like a model train set. Muddy tracks, ant-sized pickup trucks, and the massive white fiberglass segments of the turbine towers lying prone in the dirt. We were in the middle of a critical sequence stacking the midsection of Tower 4. A gust like that, with a 100-ton steel tube dangling from a boom, could turn a precision operation into a pendulum of death in seconds. "Gray, copy. Why have we stopped?" The voice crackled in my earpiece. It wasn't Toby, my foreman. It was Ryan Bennett, I sighed, adjusting the polarizing shades on my nose. Ryan was the new project manager, a 28-year-old with an MBA and a pair of pristine work boots that had never touched anything deeper than a puddle in a paved parking lot. "Wind shear, Ryan," I replied, keeping my eyes on the load charts. "Gusts are hitting 30 plus. It's outside the lift plan parameters. We wait until it settles." "We are 2 days behind schedule, Cameron." Ryan's voice came back sharp and tinny. "The forecast said 10 miles per hour. The sensors on the ground are reading 12. Move the load." I looked out the reinforced glass. The flags on the boom tip were whipping violently, snapping like gunshots that only I could hear through the vibration of the diesel engine behind me. Ground wind and air wind are two different beasts. Ryan didn't understand that. To him, the world was a spreadsheet, and nature was just a vendor that was late on delivery. "Ground sensors don't matter up here," I said, my hand hovering over the joystick, locking the swing brake. "Physics doesn't care about your schedule. I'm not moving this steel until the shear drops. Stand by." There was a pause, a static hiss that felt heavy with irritation. "If you don't move that load in 5 minutes, Gray, I'm coming down there to have a serious conversation about your employment status." I leaned back in the ergonomic seat, feeling the subtle sway of the massive machine beneath me. The heater hummed against the chill of the mountain air. "You can have a conversation with whoever you want, Ryan, but unless you can control the weather, this crane isn't moving." I watched the horizon. Dark clouds were banking over the ridgeline. It wasn't just a gust. A front was moving in. I knew the rhythm of this mountain better than I knew the layout of my own backyard. I'd spent 6 months prepping this site, studying the soil density, the wind patterns, the access roads. "Toby." I switched channels to the rigger frequency. "Secure the taglines. Lock it down. We're going to be here a while. Copy that, Cam." Toby's voice was relieved. "It's getting ugly down here, too. Dust is kicking up." I ignored Ryan's silence. In this seat, I was God. The liability, the lives of the men below, and the integrity of $1 million piece of steel were in my hands. Ryan could scream at his laptop all he wanted. Up here, gravity was the only law that mattered, and I was its judge. 2 hours later, the wind had died down enough to safely ground the load, but the shift was effectively over. The sun was dipping behind the peaks, casting long, jagged shadows across the muddy expanse of the site. I climbed down the ladder, my boots hitting the gravel with a heavy crunch. My joints ached, a familiar dull throb in my lower back that served as a reminder of 3 decades in the industry. I walked toward the site trailers, intending to grab my logbook and head home to Elena and a hot meal. But as I passed the main office, the door swung open. Gray. Inside, now, Ryan Bennett stood in the doorway. He wasn't wearing a hard hat or a safety vest, just a crisp button-down shirt that looked ridiculous against the backdrop of heavy industry. He held a tablet like a shield, I wiped the grease from my hands onto a rag and stepped inside. The trailer smelled of stale coffee and aggressive air conditioning. Toby was sitting in the corner, looking at his boots. That wasn't a good sign. It cost us $40,000 in idle time today, Ryan said, not bothering to offer me a seat. He walked behind his desk, sitting down to emphasize the power dynamic. 40,000! I saved you a $10 million crane and potentially 3 lives, I said, my voice level. If that load had swung in that shear, it would have buckled the boom. You know the safety protocols, the Ryan. Or at least, you signed the paper that said you read them. Ryan laughed, a short, barking sound void of humor. Safety protocols. That's the crutch you old-timers always lean on when you don't want to work. I checked the regional data. The wind was within margins. Regional data is an average, I said, stepping closer to the desk. I was in the seat. I felt the lateral force. The load moment indicator was redlining. The computer was redlining because you haven't calibrated it correctly. Ryan snapped, tapping his tablet. I've been looking at the budget, Cameron. You are the single most expensive line item on this entire payroll. Do you know what your hourly rate is compared to the rest of the crew? I know what my certification is worth, I said. You're not paying for me to pull a lever. You're paying me to know when not to pull it. Ryan stood up, smoothing his shirt. He looked at me with genuine disdain, the look of a man who believes that money equates to intelligence. That's the arrogance I'm talking about, he sneered. You think you're some kind of wizard because you can operate a joystick? My 7-year-old nephew plays flight simulators more complex than that crane. Any fool can run a crawler crane, Cameron. It's automated. It's hydraulics and computers. You're just a glorified, fleshy servo motor. The room went quiet. I looked at Toby. He was pale, shaking his head slightly, pleading with his eyes for me not to explode. I felt a cold calm wash over me. It was the same calm I felt when a cable snapped or a load shifted. Panic is for amateurs. Professionals assess the damage and calculate the next move. Is that what you think? I asked softly. That any fool can do this? I know it, Ryan said, smirking. In fact, I can get 2 operators from the temp agency for what I pay you. Younger guys, hungry guys, guys who won't shut down a site because of a breeze. He tossed a folder onto the desk. It slid across the faux wood surface and stopped at my fingertips. We're restructuring the labor allocation, effective immediately. I'm terminating your contract for cause insubordination and failure to meet performance targets. I looked down at the folder. Termination. The word should have stung. It should have made me think about the mortgage, about the tuition for my daughter's last year of college, about the medical bills for Elena's physical therapy. But all I could focus on was the sheer, breathtaking ignorance of the man standing in front of me. I reached into my pocket. My fingers brushed against the heavy brass key ring, the master key to the Liebherr, the ignition key, the lockout tag keys. You're firing me, I stated not as a question but as a clarification. I am, Ryan said, crossing his arms. Pack your gear. Security will escort you to the gate. I don't want you poisoning the morale of the new crew coming in tomorrow. The new crew, I repeated. And they are certified for the LR 13,000? They have their NCCC's Theo specialty cards for heavy lift and nacelle installation. Ryan waved his hand dismissively. It's a crane, Cameron. It picks things up and puts them down. Don't try to baffle me with union jargon. We'll be fine. Better than fine, because we'll be under budget. I slowly pulled the keys from my pocket. They jingled in the silence of the trailer. I didn't throw them. I didn't slam them down. I placed them gently on the desk, right on top of his precious spreadsheet printouts. The daily inspection log is in the cab, I said quietly. The load charts for the nacelle lift are programmed into the onboard computer, but they require a biometric override code to access the high-altitude sequencing. My code. We'll reset it, Ryan said, already looking back at his screen. IT can handle it. I almost smiled. IT can handle it. He thought the crane's operating system was like a Windows laptop. He thought he could just call tech support and reset the safety parameters of a machine capable of lifting a suburban house. Okay, I said. Good luck, Ryan. I turned to leave. And Cameron? Ryan called out just as my hand touched the doorknob. I paused. Leave the company jacket. You didn't pay for it. I unzipped the heavy high-visibility parka, revealing my flannel shirt underneath. I folded the jacket neatly and set it on the chair by the door. You're making a mistake, Toby whispered as I walked past him. Not me, Toby, I said, loud enough for Ryan to hear. I'm just the fleshy servo motor. I'm going home. I walked out into the twilight. The wind was picking up again, whistling through the lattice boom of the giant crane that loomed over the site like a sleeping dinosaur. It was a beautiful machine, a dangerous machine. I climbed into my truck, a beat-up Ford that had seen more job sites than Ryan had seen hot dinners. I cranked the engine and dialed Elena. "Hey, honey," she answered on the first ring. "You coming home?" "Yeah," I said, watching the security guard wave me toward the exit. "I'm coming home early, and I think we're going to take that vacation we talked about." "Did something happen?" she asked, hearing the tone in my voice. "Let's just say I handed the keys to a teenager driving a Ferrari," I said, turning onto the main highway, "and I want to be in a different zip code when he crashes it." The first morning of unemployment is always the loudest. It's not the noise that gets you. It's the lack of it. For 30 years, my mornings began at 4:30 a.m. with the groan of diesel generators, the slam of truck doors, and the crackle of radio chatter. Now, at 7:00 a.m., the only sound in my kitchen was the hum of the refrigerator and a gentle clinking of Elena's spoon against her coffee mug. "You're pacing," Elena noted, not looking up from her tablet. She knew me better than I knew myself sometimes. "I'm not pacing," I lied, walking from the sink to the window for the 10th time. "I'm just adjusting." "You're waiting for the phone to ring," she corrected, finally meeting my eyes. Her gaze was soft but firm. "You want them to call and beg you to come back." "I don't want them to beg," I grumbled, pouring my third cup of black coffee. "I just want to know if they managed to bypass the biometric lock on the load moment indicator without tripping the safety lockout. And if they didn't, then they're sitting in a $300 million paperweight," I said, taking a sip. My phone buzzed on the counter. It wasn't a call, it was a text from Toby. "New guy can't get the seat to adjust. Ryan is screaming about faulty equipment. Says you sabotaged the hydraulics." "Did you?" I snorted. I typed back, "Tell him the seat has a weight sensor. If the operator is under 160 pounds, it assumes it's a child and locks out. Safety feature." He hired a kid, didn't he? 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Then, yeah. Kid looks like he's 12. Ryan is trying to bypass the sensor with sandbags. It's a circus cam. Site is dead quiet. No lifts today. I showed the text to Elena. "Silence on the ridge," I said. "That's the sound of money burning." I walked out to the porch. The wind was still gusting, shaking the pine trees in our yard. Up on the ridge, 10 miles away, it would be howling. A novice operator in a seat he didn't fit, bypassing safety sensors with sandbags, trying to lift a 100-ton nacelle and 30-mile-an-hour winds. It wasn't just stupid. It was criminal. "You need to protect yourself," Elena said, stepping out behind me and wrapping her cardigan tighter. "Something happens up there, that man that Bennett, he's going to try to pin it on the last person who touched the keys. He's already saying you sabotaged it." She was right. In this industry, reputation is currency. If Ryan Bennett crashed a crane and successfully blamed it on my negligence or sabotage, my certification, my life's work, would be ash. I couldn't just sit here and drink coffee. I needed armor. "I need to make a call," I said, the decision hardening in my chest like concrete setting. "Who?" "Liliana," I said. "It's time to cash in a favor." Liliana James wasn't a lawyer, and she wasn't a cop. She was something far more dangerous in the world of heavy construction, a union safety auditor with a consultancy license. She knew where the bodies were buried because she usually dug the holes for the companies that tried to bury them, then sold the maps to the unions. I hadn't spoken to her in 5 years, not since I pulled her out of a collapsed trench in Detroit before the shoring wall gave way. She promised me then, "You ever get in a bind, Gray, you call me, day or night." I dialed the number. It rang twice. Cameron Gray. Her voice was unmistakable, smoky, sharp, and impatient. "I was just thinking about you. I saw the weather report for the Aurora Ridge project. Nasty shear up there?" "You track my weather?" I asked. "I track the big jobs, Cam. You know that. Why are you calling me at 8:00 a.m. on a Tuesday? You should be in the cab." "I was fired yesterday," I said flatly. "Insubordination. I refused a lift in high wind." There was a pause on the line. I could hear the click of a keyboard. "Ryan Bennett?" she asked. "You know him?" "I know of him," Liliana said, her tone dripping with disdain. "Nepotism hire. His uncle is on the board of directors. He's a cost cutter. A butcher with a spreadsheet. He fired you? Yeah. And he's accusing me of sabotage because the new operator can't figure out the weight sensors. Let me guess, she said, the keyboard clicking faster now. He replaced you with non-union labor? Scabs, temp agency looks like. Young kids. Interesting, Liliana murmured. Very interesting. Cam, do you have your copy of the site insurance router? The specific one for the Liber LR 13,000? I have the standard contract, I said. Why? Because, she said, her voice dropping an octave. Ryan Bennett is an idiot, but he's an arrogant idiot. He thinks he can swap a master certified operator for a rookie to save $200 an hour. But the insurance policy for a lift, that size specifically, the nacelle installation, usually has a named operator clause. Meaning that unless you are in that seat or someone with equal documented hours on that specific machine, the entire site's liability insurance is void. If he scratches the paint on a turbine blade, the insurance company walks away. And if the insurance walks, the bank pulls the financing. I felt a smile tug at the corner of my mouth. So he's flying naked. He's flying naked in a hurricane, Cam. But we need proof. Give me an hour. I'm going to pull the filings from the State Labor Board. Don't answer his calls. Don't text Toby. Go dark. Let him dig the hole a little deeper. He's using sandbags to bypass the seat sensor, I added. Liliana actually laughed. It was a terrifying sound. Oh, Cameron. By the time I'm done with him, he won't be able to get a job managing a lemonade stand. Stay by the phone. True to her word, Liliana called back in 45 minutes. I got it, she said, no preamble. I hacked excuse me, accessed the subcontractor portal. Cameron, it's worse than we thought. How so? The certification clause isn't just in the insurance, it's in the municipal permit for the ridge development. Because of the environmental proximity to the eagle nesting grounds, the county demanded that only Level 4 eco-certified operators handle the heavy machinery to minimize noise and swing radius. I frowned. I remember that course. It took me 3 weekends in Denver. It was a pain. Yeah, well, it's a rare cert, Liliana said. I ran a check on the temp agency Ryan is using, Rapid Labor Inc. They specialize in warehouse forklift drivers and light commercial framing. They don't have a single guy on their roster with a Level 4 Eco-Certi, not one. So he's operating illegally, I said. He's operating criminally, Liliana corrected. Every time that engine turns over with an uncertified operator, it's a $10,000 fine from the county. And here's the kicker. The contract explicitly states that the project manager must verify all certifications before work commences. He can't claim ignorance. He didn't check, I said, remembering how he'd tossed my keys onto the desk. He just saw the hourly rate. Exactly, he's billing the parent company Global Energy for a master operator rate. I see the invoices here. He's charging them $350 an hour for the operator slot. I was making $85, I said. And the temp agency is probably charging him $40, Liliana said. Do the math, Cam. He's billing for a premium expert, paying for a rookie, and pocketing the spread. He fired you not just because you are expensive, but because you were the only thing standing between him and a massive skim. The realization hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just incompetence. It was theft. He was risking lives, Toby's life, the ground crew's lives, so he could siphon off the difference in our paychecks. That son of a... I trailed off, gripping the phone. Don't get mad, Liliana said sharply. Get ready. He's going to fail today. The wind is picking up, and those sandbags won't fool the gyroscopic stabilizers. When he fails, he's going to get desperate. He's going to try to bring you back, or he's going to try to cover it up. We need to be there when he makes the mistake. What do I do? Nothing, she said. You wait. Let the Scab crew break something. It sounds cold, Cam, but we need a material failure to trigger an audit. As long as nothing breaks, he can fudge the paperwork. But the moment metal hits dirt, the auditor comes out. And guess who the regional auditor is? I paused. You? Me, she purred. I'm going to drive up to Aurora Ridge. I'll park down the road. When the call comes in, and it will, I want you to meet me at the gate, bring your certification card, and bring popcorn. Liliana drove a matte black SUV that looked more like a government assault vehicle than a civilian transport. She met me at a gravel turnout on the public access road, about a mile from the site, but with a clear line of sight to the ridge. Get in, she said, unlocking the doors. The heater is better in here. I climbed into the passenger seat. The dashboard was lit up with a laptop and a radio scanner tuned to the site's frequency. Through the windshield, using a pair of high-powered binoculars, I could see the orange lattice boom of the Lee Bear rising against the gray sky. Wind is gusting 25, I noted, checking the anemometer reading on her screen. He shouldn't be lifting. He has a milestone payment due on Friday, Liliana said, typing rapidly. If Tower 4 isn't capped, he misses a $2 million draw from the bank. He's gonna lift. We watched in silence as the crane groaned into motion. Even from this distance, I could tell the movements were wrong. Smoothness is the mark of a pro. This was jerky, hesitant. The boom swung left, then stopped abruptly, causing the load of 40-ton steel tower segment to pendulum wildly. Easy, kid, I whispered, my hands gripping the dashboard as if I could control the machine remotely. Feather the brake, don't slam it. The radio scanner crackled. Whoa, watch the tagline. You're drifting. That was Toby's voice, tight with panic. I'm trying to center it, a young, terrified voice replied. The wind keeps pushing the boom. That's because you didn't compensate for the drift before you unspooled. I yelled at the windshield, though he couldn't hear me. The load swung wide, catching a gust. The operator panicked and slewed hard to the right to chase it. It was the worst thing he could have done. The momentum of the 40-ton tube combined with the swing speed. Look out! On the ridge, the steel segment smashed into the side of the already erected base tower. A dull, metallic boom echoed down the valley seconds later. The crane rocked violently on his tracks, the boom flexing like a fishing rod with a marlin on the line. There it is, Liliana said softly. Impact. He just dented a $3 million component, I said, feeling sick. And he shock-loaded the boom. That crane is going to lock out automatically. Good, she said, closing her laptop. Phase 1 is complete. The site is now officially a crime scene of incompetence. The scanner was chaos. Shut it down! Shut it down now, Toby was screaming. Don't you dare shut down. Ryan's voice cut through, shrill and distorted. Correct the angle and reset the load. It's just a scratch. It's not a scratch, Ryan. You crimped the flange. That tower is structural scrap. I grabbed the binoculars again. The load was dangling precariously, twisting in the wind. The operator had frozen. He was holding the load brake, terrified to move. He can't land it, I told Liliana. If the flange is bent, it won't seat on the bolts. He has to bring it all the way back down to the ground. In this wind, that's a 20-minute operation. Get that piece in the air, Ryan barked. We are lifting the nacelle next. I want the tower done by lunch. The crane is red lighting, boss, the kid in the cab cried out. The LMI screen is flashing shock load. It won't let me hoist up, only down. Smart machine, I muttered. Override it, Ryan screamed. There's a key under the seat. Turn the safety off. I felt my blood turn to ice. He's telling an uncertified rookie to disable the load moment indicator in high winds with a compromised boom. Record that, Liliana said, tapping a key on her console. Audio captured. I don't know which key, the kid stammered. I'm coming up there, Ryan yelled. Toby, get up in the cab and override the system. Negative. Toby's voice was dead calm now. I am exercising my right to refuse unsafe work under OSHA Regulation 1926. This crew is standing down. We are clearing the radius. If you walk off the site, you're fired. All of you. Then we're fired, Toby said. Boys, drop the tools. Let's go. Through the binoculars, I saw the ground crew, 6 men in high-vis vests, walking away from the crane. They moved in a pack, heading for the safety perimeter. The load was still dangling in the air, the crane frozen, the operator trapped in the cab by his own fear and the locking mechanism of the computer. He just lost his riggers, I said. He has a load in the air and nobody to land it. He's desperate, Liliana said. Watch what he does next. 20 minutes passed. The wind whistled around the SUV. The crane hadn't moved. The load was slowly spinning, twisting the multi-part line into a mess that would take days to untangle. He's calling the insurance rep, Liliana said, pointing to a new window on her screen. I have a tap on the project's main line. He's trying to get ahead of the report. She put the call on speaker. Minor incident. Ryan's voice was smooth, completely different from the screeching maniac on the radio. A gust caught us, just a little bump. We need to expedite a claim for a replacement tower section, but I don't want to pause operations. We can lift the nacelle while we wait for the new tube. Mr. Bennett, a dry voice replied on the other end. The telemetry from the Liber is uploaded to the cloud in real time. We received a Category 1 shock load alert at 10:14 a.m. Ryan paused. Right, a sensor glitch. We're resetting it. Who was in the seat? The insurance agent asked. The telemetry shows the operator ID key was generic. It wasn't logged into Mr. Gray's profile. Mr. Gray is unavailable, Ryan said quickly. We have a highly qualified replacement, a specialist. Name? Kevin. Kevin Miller. There was the sound of typing on the other end. I'm not seeing a Kevin Miller on the approved master operator list for this policy, Mr. Bennett. In fact, the only Kevin Miller I see in the stake database is a Class C forklift driver. Silence. Mr. Bennett, if an uncertified operator was at the controls when that shock load occurred, your all-risk policy is void ab initio. That means from the beginning, you are currently uninsured. And if that tower section is damaged, you are personally liable for the replacement cost. That's approximately $200,000 plus shipping. Now wait a minute, Ryan's voice cracked. It was just a bump. I'm flagging the site for immediate audit, the agent said. Do not move that crane. An inspector will be there in the morning. The line went dead. Liliana smiled, a sharp, predatory grin. And that is the sound of the trap snapping shut. He's going to panic, I said. He needs a certified operator to lower that load safely before the inspector gets there. If the inspector sees a load dangling in the wind with a forklift driver in the seat, Ryan goes to jail for negligence. Exactly, Liliana said, starting the engine. He needs a fixer. But he doesn't know. He already fired the only one who can help him. My phone rang. The screen displayed Ryan Bennett work. Don't answer, Liliana commanded. Let it ring. Let him sweat. We're going to get lunch. The first rule of leverage in a crane cab is simple. The heavier the load, the more distance you need. The same applies to negotiations. We drove 5 miles down the mountain to a diner called the Rusty Sprocket. It was a place where the coffee was strong enough to strip paint and the clientele wore steel-toed boots. My phone vibrated against the table like an angry hornet. Ryan Bennett, work, 6 missed calls, let him sweat, Liliana said, stabbing a fork into her eggs. He's probably realizing right now that the temp agency contract explicitly indemnifies them against gross negligence and assignment. That means when the insurance company comes for him, the agency will point to the fine print and say, hey, you asked for a warm body, you got one. He's going to try to blame Toby, I said, staring at the phone. He'll say Toby didn't supervise the kid. He can try, Liliana smirked. But Toby walked off the job citing a specific OSHA regulation. That's a protected action. Ryan is alone in the storm. My phone rang again. This time it wasn't Ryan. It was Margaret Holloway, the CEO. I looked at Liliana. She raised an eyebrow. Answer that one. Put it on speaker. Mr. Gray? Margaret's voice was clipped, professional, but with an undercurrent of urgency that I'd never heard from her before. She was a woman who ran a billion-dollar energy conglomerate. She didn't do urgent. Mrs. Holloway, I said, surprised to hear from you. I have an automated alert on my desk, Cameron, she said. A Category 1 shock load on the Liber at Aurora Ridge, followed by a frantic call from our insurance underwriter asking why an uncertified operator named Kevin was at the controls of a $300 million asset. You have to ask your project manager about that, ma'am, I said, keeping my voice steady. I was terminated 2 days ago for refusing an unsafe lift. There was a profound silence on the line. Terminated, she repeated, the word cold enough to freeze nitrogen. Ryan told me you were on medical leave. I glanced at Liliana, who was grinning like a Cheshire cat. No, ma'am, he fired me. Said I was too expensive and that any fool can run a crawler crane. He replaced me with a temp. Is the load currently secured? Margaret asked, cutting to the chase. I'm not on site, I said. But based on the wind shear and the shock load data, I'd guess you have a 40-ton tower section swinging in 30-mile-an-hour gusts, attached to a boom that has likely suffered microfractures, operated by a kid who is terrified to touch the controls. Can you stabilize it? I'm not an employee, Mrs. Holloway. My insurance coverage ended when I walked at the gate. If I touch that machine and something goes wrong, I'm liable. I will reinstate you immediately, she said. Retroactive to yesterday, double your rate for the hazard pay. Just get up there and bring that load down before it tears the boom off. I appreciate the offer, I said slowly, but there's a problem. The site is currently under an active OSHA refusal to work order initiated by the foreman. I can't cross a picket line, even a one-man line, unless what? Unless there is an independent safety audit performed before I step back into the cab to verify the equipment is sound and the site is compliant. Who can do that on such short notice? I looked at Liliana. She winked. Well, ma'am, it just so happens that the regional union safety auditor is in the area. Her name is Liliana James. When we pulled up to the gate an hour later, the scene was grim. The wind was howling now, a full-blown mountain gale. The crane was a dark silhouette against the bruising sky, the load swinging in a terrifying 10-foot arc, groaning with every sway. The young operator, Kevin, was still in the cab, likely too scared to climb down the ladder in the wind. Ryan was waiting for us. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His hair was windblown, his expensive shirt flapping, and his face was a mask of sheer panic. Thank God, he gasped as I stepped out of the SUV. Cameron, get up there! The wind is tearing it apart. Step back, Mr. Bennett, Liliana said, slamming her door. She wore a hard hat with the union insignia and a vest that said Septi Aguter in reflective letters. This is an official site inspection. No work commences until I clear the equipment. Who are you? Ryan demanded. We don't have time for this. I'm the person who decides if you go to jail for reckless endangerment or just get sued for negligence, Liliana said, handing him a clipboard. Sign this. It acknowledges that you are surrendering site authority to the safety auditor. Ryan looked at the swinging load, then at me, then at Liliana. He signed it so hard the pen tore the paper. Cameron, Liliana said, turning to me. The boom looks compromised. The lacing on the third section is buckled. Can you bring it down without collapsing the jib? I squinted up at the steel. It was bad. The shock load had twisted the main lattice. If I put too much tension on the pendant lines, the whole thing could fold like a crushed soda can. I can do it, I said, but I need full manual control. No computer overrides. I need to feel the weight. Do it, she said. I'll clear the ground. I walked toward the crane. The familiar smell of grease and diesel hit me. I climbed the ladder, the wind tugging at my clothes. When I opened the cab door, Kevin looked at me like I was an angel. He was shaking, pale, and clearly on the verge of vomiting. Get out, son, I said gently. Go down the ladder slow. 3 points of contact. I didn't mean to, he stammered. Not your fault, I said. You were put in a seat you didn't fit. Go. I sat down. The seat molded to me instantly. I keyed in my biometric code. The computer flashed welcome apparated gray. Warning, Stursituralcum fleshters detected. I know, darling, I whispered to the machine. I know. I disengaged the automatic swing brake and felt the massive weight of the load instantly try to pull the crane over. I feathered the joystick, countering the swing with a gentle touch, dancing with the wind instead of fighting it. Slowly, agonizingly, I began to lower the hook. Bringing the load down took 45 minutes of the most intense concentration of my life. When the steel finally touched the mud with a soft thud, a cheer went up from the perimeter fence. Toby and the crew were watching. I shut down the engine and locked the cab. My hands were trembling, slightly adrenaline dump. When I climbed down, a black town car was waiting next to Liliana's SUV. The back door opened, and Margaret Holloway stepped out. She must have flown in on the company helicopter to the lower landing pad. Ryan was standing by the trailer, looking like a man facing a firing squad. Excellent work, Mr. Bad. Gray, Margaret said, ignoring Ryan completely. Truly master class. Thank you, ma'am, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. The boom is toast, though. Section 3 is twisted. You'll need a replacement before any more lifting happens. We can discuss the equipment later, Margaret said, turning her icy gaze to Ryan. Mr. Bennett, please explain why you fired a 30-year veteran and replaced him with a temp agency hire who nearly destroyed a $300 million project. I was trying to save money, Ryan stammered, his arrogance completely gone. Cameron's rates were excessive. I found a cheaper alternative. It was a budget decision. A budget decision? Liliana interrupted, stepping forward with a file folder. Is that what you call it? Because I've been looking at the payroll invoices you submitted to corporate. She handed the folder to Margaret. Here is the invoice from Rapid Labor, Inc. for the operator, Kevin Miller. Rate $45 per hour. And here's the invoice you submitted to Global Energy Accounting for specialized crane operations. Rate $350 per hour. Margaret's eyes widened as she scanned the documents. And here, Liliana continued, is a transfer from a shell company called Apex Consulting, which is registered to your home address, Ryan receiving the difference. You weren't saving the company money. You were pocketing the spread. Ryan's face went white. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Embezzlement, Margaret said, her voice dangerously quiet. Fraud, reckless endangerment, and voiding our insurance policy. It was just a temporary cash flow, Ryan tried to argue. You're fired, Margaret said, effective immediately. Security will escort you off the premises. And Mr. Bennett, expect a call from our legal departments. And the district attorney. Ryan slumped. He looked at me, pleading. Cameron, tell her. The wind. The wind didn't steal the money, Ryan, I said. And the wind didn't lie about who was in the seat. The wind had finally died down to a manageable whisper, but inside the site trailer, the atmosphere was suffocating. Margaret Holloway sat at Ryan's desk, the same desk where he had fired me, while Liliana projected a digital paper trail onto the wall monitor. Ryan was slumped in a folding chair in the corner, watched by two of the site's security guards who looked all too happy to be detaining their former boss. It wasn't just the operator, Margaret, Liliana said, her laser pointer circling a series of transactions. Look at the material procurement logs for the foundation concrete. I leaned against the door frame, sipping a lukewarm coffee Toby had handed me. Let me guess, I said. He ordered the structural mix but paid for the sidewalk grade? Worse, Liliana replied. He created a vendor called Ridge Aggregates. It doesn't exist. He was buying substandard concrete from a residential supplier, relabeling the invoices through his shell company, and charging Global Energy for high-tensile wind farm spec. The difference is about $40 a yard. Margaret's face was a mask of controlled fury. We poured 3 foundations with that mix, she whispered. If those turbines had gone up, they would have cracked within 6 months, I finished for her. The vibration from the rotor at full torque would have pulverized that residential-grade cement. You'd have a 300-foot tower toppling onto the highway. Ryan looked up, his eyes rimmed with red. I was going to reinforce it, he mumbled. I had a plan to inject epoxy resin later. I just needed the cash flow to cover some personal debts. Gambling? I asked. It was usually gambling. Crypto, Liliana answered, pulling up another window. He leveraged himself to the hilt on some obscure coin that crashed last month. He's been stripping this project for parts to pay off margin calls. The scale of it was staggering. It wasn't just incompetence. It was a systematic dismantling of safety protocols for profit. The uncertified operator, the cheap concrete, the ghost riggers on the payroll who never showed up. It was all a desperate attempt to fill a financial black hole he had created. You didn't just risk my life, Toby said from the doorway, his voice trembling with rage. You risked every man on this mountain. For crypto? Margaret stood up. She didn't yell. She didn't throw anything. She just smoothed her blazer and looked at Ryan with the cold detachment of an executioner. Liliana, package all of this, Margaret commanded. The forensic audit, the bank transfers, the admission he just made. Send it directly to the FBI's White-Collar Crimes Division and copy our legal counsel. Already done, Liliana said, closing her laptop with a satisfying snap. Mr. Gray. Margaret turned to me. I am shutting down the site for a full structural review. We have to core sample every foundation and x-ray every weld this man authorized. It will take months. It has to be done, I agreed. You can't build on a lie. I want you to lead the remediation team, she said. Name your price. I need someone who knows what right looks like. I looked at Ryan, then at the window where the sun was setting behind the broken crane. Double my old rate, I said. And Toby gets a 20% raise, and Liliana's consulting fees paid in full today. Done, Margaret said. The end of Ryan Bennett's career didn't happen with a bang, but with the quiet click of handcuffs. The state police arrived 20 minutes later, their cruisers navigating the muddy access road with caution. They weren't there for the crane incident. They were there because Liliana had flagged the wire transfers as federal wire fraud. We stood on the gravel pad and watched them lead him out, He didn't look arrogant anymore. He looked small. He wasn't the man who laughed at my certification. He was just a kid in a suit who thought the rules didn't apply to him. You know, Ryan stopped as he passed me, the deputy gripping his arm. I really thought the computer did all the work. I really thought you were just sitting there. I looked him in the eye. That's the problem, Ryan. The computer does the work. The operator does the thinking, and you never learn the difference. They put him in the back of the cruiser. As they drove away, the sight felt lighter. The tension that had hung over the ridge for months, the frantic deadlines, the corner cutting, the disrespect evaporated with the dust of the police car. Well, Toby said, spitting on the ground. That's that. Not quite, I said, turning to the crane. We still have a compromised boom to lower and a site to clean up. You want to start now? Toby asked, incredulous. It's getting dark. No, I said, patting my pocket where the master key now rested safely. We're going to secure the perimeter, lock the gates, and go home. The wind will be here tomorrow. The mountain isn't going anywhere. Liliana walked up, slinging her bag over her shoulder. My work here is done, boys. The audit is filed. The check is, I assume, in the mail. Margaret wired it 10 minutes ago, I said. I saw the confirmation. Good. She smiled, a rare, genuine expression. You owe me dinner, Cam. Next time you're in the city. I owe you my career, I said. Dinner is the least I can do. Just keep the shiny side up, she said, climbing into her black SUV. I watched her drive off, then turned to look at the crane one last time. It stood silent against the stars, a monument to engineering and human skill. It was broken, yes, but it could be fixed, because now the rot was gone. I drove home to Elena with the windows down, letting the cold mountain air rush in. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the hum of the tires and the beat of my own heart, steady and calm. 3 months later, the remediation was finished. We had to tear out 2 foundations and re-pour them, but the turbines were finally spinning. The rhythmic whoosh-whoosh-whoosh of the blades was a heartbeat for the valley, generating clean power for 50,000 homes. I wasn't in the cab anymore. Margaret had promoted me to site director. My job was no longer to pull the levers, but to make sure the people pulling them were respected, trained, and protected. I sat on my back porch, a cold beer in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The wind chimes Elena had hung were singing softly. You look tired, Elena said, stepping out with a bowl of pretzels. Good tired, I said, taking her hand. Honest, tired. She sat next to me. Ryan's trial starts next week. Are you going? No, I said. I gave my deposition. The rest is just noise. I have work to do. I looked out at the yard thinking about the journey, about the arrogance of a man who thought money could buy physics, and the loyalty of a woman who knew that integrity was the only currency that mattered.